Hello and welcome back to Between the Pages. I'm joined once again by Alan Kistler. We're both fresh from Comic-Con. Me a little sick, not quite as fresh. Did you have a good time?
I had a great time. I wound up randomly falling asleep for a couple days afterwards. I would be working, and I'm not a guy who takes naps.
Yeah.
But I would be working, and around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, just whoa. And I would wake up later like, what just happened?
That's hilarious.
I was so exhausted.
Well, do you remember where you were when they were like, Avengers 2, Age of Ultron?
I do remember. I was having dinner with a couple of friends, and someone was at the Marvel panel tweeting and texting us like mad. It's like, who's Ultron? Like, oh no.
Who is tweeting you?
I will not embarrass them.
Okay.
I will not embarrass them.
Well, all I have to say is, first off, it means we get a pass on all this Thanos stuff that's coming out right now. You can take your time reading it now.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to come up for like Avengers 3, apparently.
Yeah, I guess they're taking their time to build up to it, which actually I can't say I disagree with, because Thanos usually involves the universes in peril, so what do you do for Avengers 3 if that's Avengers 2?
Well, what do you think of the theory, and I agree with this theory, and I floated it out there when the news broke, that this is like a Robert Downey Jr. move, that they were gearing up towards Thanos, because why tease Thanos at the end of Avengers 1? You know, why have all this Thanos stuff coming out now from Marvel? I mean, maybe Robert Downey Jr.'s intentions are pure, you know, but he's like, you know what? I don't want to spend a lot of time in space. I want a Tony-centric story, a Tony Stark-centric story. So let's go Ultron.
I could definitely see that becoming the case, and the fact is, you know, plans change. Sometimes you intend for one thing to happen, then you realize what kind of budget that would entail, and you don't know if Guardians of the Galaxy is actually going to go off well. You hope, but you don't know. So maybe you want to bide your time with, okay, let's still keep it on Earth.
We know everybody likes Tony Stark.
And we know everyone likes robots.
Yes. Well, and that's what I think is funny about this. I think the general public could actually really, I mean, like when I say that, I mean non-comic book readers.
Right.
I think they're really going to like Ultron, because he's basically, if Skynet downloaded his consciousness, or became self-aware and downloaded its consciousness into a Terminator, that's what you'd have.
What's really fun, it's sort of like why I like the Daleks in Doctor Who instead of the Cybermen, in that, like, there are so many robotic or cyborg enemies that have no emotions, but Ultron hates. He has emotion.
And loves sometimes.
And loves sometimes. But mainly hates.
He creates some lady friends.
Yeah, in a very Oedipal way.
He cross-dresses, as we'll discuss. He's a complicated robot.
You know, he's got issues. I don't think he's ever denied that.
No, that's true. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I was looking into his history, and it said that he even started out, you know, as an Oedipal complex, really. Yeah,
well, I mean, it's a weird start out for Ultron, because even then, speaking of changing plans, it seems like they were changing the plan of Ultron with each issue, because you first have the Masters of Evil, the anti-Avengers, fighting the team, and they're led by this mysterious Crimson Cowl, and who is the hooded man, the Crimson Cowl? And it's like, oh my God, it's Jarvis! And we thought we were talking to the Crimson Cowl, but it's just this robot that Jarvis was remote controlling. And it's Jarvis the whole time, who, if you only know the movies, in the comics, Jarvis is a literal butler.
Yeah, he's an actual person.
Yeah, he's not an AI program.
I thought that was too Bruce Wayne-y, though, for the movie.
Right, exactly. But then, literally the next issue, no, we lied, it's not Jarvis. The robot he was seemingly controlling is the real bad guy. That's a real robot. Where'd he come from? And then you find out, oh, Hank Pym made him, and then Ultron gave him amnesia and ran away. And
don't you love the convoluted logic of comic book plots?
Yeah.
They're like, okay, well, if we cross this here, we do amnesia here, we can make it work. And time travel.
Yeah, and you can see how just it's a different form of storytelling, because in the cartoons and Ultimate and other versions of Ultron that they've done, there is no we made him up and then forgot about it. Like, there's no amnesia ray.
They have the beautiful hindsight of 2020. You know, they know how. You know, these people early on were pioneers, finding their way to discover Ultron. But I think it's funny that how this stuff works out, because the rumor is that Jarvis will turn evil, like that AI will become corrupt.
Right, and
that would work with this origin.
That really works with how the character was originally introduced.
And that's where the pieces start to fall into place, because we'll talk about it in a minute how the Vision's related to Ultron. But Vin Diesel's going around posting pictures of the Vision on his social media.
Yeah.
So
That would be a very muscular Vision.
Wouldn't it? It would be so bizarre.
I always picture the Vision as very, very thin and lithe and
yeah, well, also, you know, I
nimble.
guess if we were willing to have Clark Gregg do it, you know, I guess we can go in the other direction.
Right, there was a constant rumor that Clark Gregg was, which I thought was a dumb rumor.
But
I never bought into that.
But I guess if you're going off the logic that it uses Wonder Man's brain waves for the Vision.
Right.
I guess then that, because it's like, hey, Vin Diesel, you want to play a robot for just a while, and then you'll get to be Wonder Man. But, although I think Wonder Man's kind of lame.
Yeah, I've never liked Wonder Man. His best story was the original one, where he showed up and died. It was a decent story. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did a great job. But
so let's go. So Ultron is introduced, and he has a family right away. He's a very prolific robot.
Right. So I mean, when we see the flashback of how Hank Pym created the original version of Ultron, who's not humanoid, who's just meant to be a helper robot.
He's just made out of adamantium at first?
Not yet. Adamantium came later. Adamantium
right.
didn't exist yet in the comics, but it would soon.
Just plain old metal.
Yeah, steel and whatnot. and Hank Pym creates Ultron and is immediately freaked out that Ultron refers to him as Dada.
Yeah.
And calls him Dad.
Creepy.
And he's kind of freaked out, like, how can, especially because he didn't turn on Ultron yet. Ultron kind of self-activated.
Oh.
And he just realized, like, I really made something I didn't account for. Then Ultron, you know, zaps him with amnesia and runs away. And Ultron makes these humanoid bodies for him. So the first Ultron who actually fights the Avengers called himself Ultron 5. So
yeah, they're like Brainiac. They're numbered. Right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And so Ultron 5 was the first villain, and then Ultron 6 took adamantium and gave himself an adamantium body. And so that was the first adamantium Ultron, and he considered himself the ultimate Ultron because of that.
Ultron's always evolving, right?
Yeah,
and that's like just like your local Apple products.
Basically, and then you had Ultron 7, who was a giant, and he was like a couple stories tall.
So let's talk about, because you mentioned Scarlet Witch, and
right.
she's related to the Vision. This is just quite the family tree we're getting here, right? So how does the Vision grow
so very quickly after being established as a new Avengers villain, Ultron then created his own kind of lackey/son, the Vision. And at first we were just told that it was just a creation that originally was Ultron, and then later on the story became that it was the original Human Torch, who was an android, who had been remodeled.
This is 1940s, like Bucky's pal Human Torch.
Not
anything with the Fantastic Four.
Right, the original Human Torch was an android character that was introduced in 1939. And has nothing to do with...
It's confusing.
Yeah. There are two Human Torches.
I don't know why they do it.
Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four, and the original guy was an android, also called
Michael
Jim.
B. Jordan better check the fine print on his contract.
Seriously. But, so whoever the Vision was, and they've changed his origin a couple times, like it is a creation of Ultron, who was given the brainwave patterns of the dead Wonder Man.
Yes, and he's like a synthetic robot, right?
Right, which originally was the idea for the original Human Torch as well. It's not an android in the sense of it's a mechanical man underneath. It's a synthetic human being.
Well, it's created. They do that because so the characters can make out with it.
Basically, yeah. And
it's not too weird.
And so that's the Vision. Roy Thomas came up with the idea of synthezoid as synthetic android.
And at first, he's like a Trojan pal for the Avengers, right?
Well, I mean, originally he's flat out is attacking them.
Okay.
But during the battle, he's impressed with their loyalty and their behavior towards each other, and realizes that they are more of a family than he and his father is, and so he sides with them. So actually, history repeated itself, because just as Ultron turned on Hank Pym, the Vision turned on Ultron.
Family issues.
Absolutely. and then Ultron later decided to make another lackey, but this time, instead of using the brainwaves of some dead Avenger he never met, he uses the brainwaves of Janet Van Dyne, Wasp, Hank Pym's lover, wife, ex-wife, depending on what year it is.
He's like, I know how this one's going to turn out.
Right. So right there we have a huge Oedipal complex, because not only is he trying to destroy Daddy's dream and world, he's creating a copy of Mom.
To date.
To date.
Yeah, not to be Mom.
Yeah.
By any means.
Yeah, exactly. Jocasta.
Yes.
Yeah. Who was around for a while.
And she's even been brought up recently, but he did another female.
Alchema.
Yeah, that's a crazy name. And she did not look very humanoid.
No, she looked like a chick of Ultron, which I was like, wait, dude, this is...
He's making out with himself.
This is some ego playing right here. It's just like, let me date a twin of myself with metal boobs.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate that you're willing to go there.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Ultron went there. It's what's there.
That's so funny.
Yeah, Ultron, he's had ups and downs because there have been just some weird stories of like, okay, you just wanted to show Ultron again. And then you've had some interesting stories where like Ultron 12 actually wanted to redeem himself and wanted to work with Hank Pym and be a good guy.
Well, it's interesting, you know, as you talk about it, he has really no character development. He's a very juvenile character. He's very much like a little boy.
Yeah, yeah. The only times we've seen the character development is when we had Ultron 12, who actually called himself Ultron Mark 12 to separate himself. And he wound up sacrificing his life, what have you, defending Hank Pym against one of the older models. And it was interesting that, okay, so you could have two Ultrons exist simultaneously.
Well, it's because they get sucked into the time stream.
Or even just, you know, it's not literally a program necessarily that goes from body to body. Sometimes it is like a new version of the program goes into a new body.
Also, wasn't there this thing where Ultron programmed all of his previous Ultrons to want to try and build him or something, right?
Right, so, right. Like, there's constantly, and even like Jocasta was programmed to rebuild Ultron at one point. Like,
she's like, I need a hobby. I just feel the urge to create. And they're like, oh my God, you built Ultron.
The only other time we got some character development was Kurt Busiek's great Ultron story where Ultron shows up again and not only is now using an army of a couple hundred versions of himself, but wipes out a European country, Slovenia. And also in that, Ultron's not just trying to create children, he's trying to create a race.
Oh, very much Skynet.
Yeah, and he wants all of the robots to be individual, because it's not that he wants a hive mind, he just really hates organic life, basically.
He thinks it's flawed, right?
Right, absolutely.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. I should read that story because I was just going to say...
It's fantastic.
I've never read a good Ultron story.
And to be fair, there are a few of them, frankly. He's a reliably destructible villain.
Well, I think he's a plot device. I don't think he's no Dr. Doom, no Magneto.
And a lot of times he was there to kind of... It became easy to bring Ultron there to either make the Vision or Hank Pym feel guilty. And so the real character development is on them.
Yeah. Ultron shows up and everyone just looks at Hank Pym.
Right.
And they're like, thanks a lot, Hank.
And actually, Kurt Busiek finally solved a basic question about Ultron because we knew that the Vision had his programming based on brainwaves of Wonder Man, and that's why he had a personality. We knew that Jocasta had brainwaves based on the Wasp, and that's why she had a personality. But no one had ever talked about what Ultron... how he was alive in the sense that he was. And in Kurt Busiek's story, Hank Pym reveals it was his brainwaves that were used to create Ultrons, and so that's why he had a nervous breakdown afterwards and had this guilt because he realized, well, that means if I went down a slightly different path, I would be this sick, I would be this insane, I would be this nuts.
Well, that's really good, and I think, but it still keeps the focus on Hank Pym.
It does.
And I think that's probably the key as to why the character's never really come into his own, because
right.
he's always just an extension of Hank Pym.
Yeah, and which is kind of disappointing, especially depending on where you get into Ultron, because the first Ultron story I read, he was fighting Iron Man, Black Panther, and Spider-Man. It was a summer crossover. So
wait, was that the Bendis one?
No.
Okay.
This was years
That's
ago.
That's where I
this
first met Ultron.
This was 90s.
And you can imagine.
Way back in the 90s.
You can imagine my confusion when I met Ultron.
Yeah, Bendis had a weird story. It was the opening story arc of Mighty Avengers.
It was a big deal, by the way. Huge deal at the time.
Ultron showed up again, and this time had somehow developed an organic body.
Well, it was because he infected Tony Stark.
Right.
And Stark's tech had bonded with him organically like it does in the movie.
Right, Tony had nanites all over his body, basically.
So he turned Tony into a woman.
Yeah, he turned Tony into a clone of the Wasp.
It's so embarrassing.
Left her naked.
Well, of course. Well, Frank Cho was drawing it, so.
Well, it was just this weird story because it seemed to negate all of Ultron's intelligence. He didn't seem to be aware of his surroundings. He didn't seem to have a plan other than attack the Avengers.
And why would he want to become Janet Van Dyne?
Yeah, it seemed really antithetical to Ultron's years of hating organic life. And so I kept waiting for would it change his mind, or maybe this was like Mark 12, a rogue Ultron unit, and we never got to that point. It was just, we made this Ultron a naked chick for some reason, and then we stopped it. So and Tony got back to normal. So
that's
we
why
won.
Nobody remembers that story.
Yeah, well, it didn't have any real after effect other than Tony knew that he was a chick for a while.
Yeah, that awkward.
Yeah, which was awkward for a page.
Nobody brings it up.
No one's brought it up again. Meanwhile,
Let's show that comic to Robert Downey Jr. and see if he is still into the Ultron comic, Ultron movie.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Ultron is a character who later writers have really paid attention to. What can you do with this character? Like the space version that appeared in Annihilation.
That was interesting, right?
It was an interesting version, and then also in Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the cartoon. What was really cool is that you saw dozens of Ultrons acting as robotic house servants and prison guards for Hank Pym, and later they turn evil, and when that happens, it's this great idea of, well, we've gotten so used to them, we've given them access to everything, and that's almost the Skynet fear.
Yeah, well also, you know, it's the whole mad scientist vibe too, more with Hank Pym, which I like. But then also, I think we have to discuss, even though I don't think there's really no reason to creatively, Age of Ultron, the recent crossover, because it's the same title even that they're using, Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Yeah. I doubt they're going to adapt the story.
Oh, I know that they're going to take anything from it. Basically, it's basically like the Avengers version of Age of Apocalypse. I feel it's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, it's sort of actually, it reminded me, because Bendis had just written All New X-Men, where you have the old team meeting the current present-day team, and Wolverine brings up at one point, well, now that we have young Cyclops, let's kill him and fix the past and fix history. And in this version of events, an Ultron from the future comes to our present, and throws it into an Age of Apocalypse kind of timeline. And Wolverine's solution is, let's go back in time and kill Hank Pym so we fix everything.
Right. Yeah, and they do.
And they do, and things do not work out right.
Because killing is bad.
And also, like, I would think Wolverine of all people would know this. He's no stranger to time travel.
That's hilarious. That's true. He never gets it right.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, you were willing to let
Why do they send him all the time?
I don't know, but he's also willing to let so many other people redeem themselves, including himself.
Yeah.
But like to kill Hank Pym before he did anything bad, to kill Cyclops before he did anything bad, it was okay with him.
Well, he fixes it, and doesn't affect anything. Well, I mean, it breaks the multiverse.
Well, here's the thing.
But it was a really long way around to break the multiverse.
Right, and that was my main thing with Age of Ultron, was that almost from the beginning you knew, okay, this is going to be fixed in that classic time travel trope of, and no one will remember it. It did have an effect of, we've apparently altered time in the Marvel Universe too many times, and now other universes are leaking in.
Yeah.
But I would have liked that as the beginning of a story.
Right?
Instead of however many issues. It seemed like it went on for a long time.
But yet it didn't. It didn't go on long enough. I mean, it was Age of Ultron for like 2 months, you know? Like, I mean, like it was Age of Apocalypse was so great because it was like a year or so. Like, it took its time.
Well, also, I think what Age of Apocalypse did wonderfully was that it really explored the world. There was a group of people.
That's a good, excellent point. Well, there was a goal.
There was a group of people who wanted to go back in time and change things to make it right again. But most of the
Gambit
books,
and the Externals, right? That's not.
Well, they were kind of on a side mission that would help make that possible. But they had their own stuff going on.
Yeah, but if you were reading the main X-Men book, you were just exploring the world.
Right.
Which is
yeah,
totally
you were exploring the world. You were seeing these flashbacks of like how people had wound up differently. Nightcrawler's miniseries Excalibur by Warren Ellis was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Go read that.
Yeah.
Don't read Age.
Juggernaut
don't
became
read Age
a monk.
Of Ultron.
It was amazing.
So let's talk about Ultron. Even in other media, he isn't used a lot. I mean, well, I mean, I think he's getting used more and more because he's one of the few Avengers-specific villains, and they really need them because they sold off all their other properties to other studios. Well, so that's why you're seeing all these characters get all this attention.
He's also a villain that is really easy to get the idea across. He's an artificial
suit? Yeah.
Right. He's an artificial intelligence who went nuts, and actually in the animated versions, they keep bringing up Tony Stark as a co-creator.
Or just the full creator sometimes,
Or just in Avengers Next, he was the full creator. In Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which was a fantastic cartoon, he made basically the body you got and gave some AI research, but it was Hank Pym that really created him and made him
Well, so Ultron. I guess you're seeing a shift slowly, and it's complete with the movie, of taking Ultron away from Hank Pym.
Yeah, which I'm not really down with, just because I don't like when one character seems to be the only scientist in the world or seems to have the monopoly on a certain thing.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that, you know, that's why I think that Robert Downey Jr. changed the story and sped it up, because the Ant-Man movie, they said, and Joss Whedon said, you know, unless he's just fooling us,
right,
that Hank Pym won't be in the Avengers 2.
Right, and if he's not, then yeah, if someone has to create Ultron, you've got to have it be Tony if it's not Hank. No, and I get that.
Unless Bruce Banner makes another mistake, you know.
I mean, and at least we've established in Iron Man's 1 through 3 how much Tony experiments with AI, whether it's the robot helper or Jarvis.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's an excellent point. And people love Science Bros.
Yeah.
I think it's a smart move, but as I said before, I don't see any reason to make an Ant-Man movie. You know, he's not a founding member of the Avengers. He doesn't create Ultron. You know, I mean, maybe I should have more faith in Hank.
I would like an Ant-Man Wasp movie.
That would be great.
I would like that, because there's no I mean, he is far more interesting when he became part of a couple.
Well, also Hank is like one of the darkest Avengers there is. You know, I mean,
as they made him later on, yeah.
Well, everybody says, well, he only hit Janet once, and it was an accident. Look, he hit Janet. They have a crazy sex scene later on, years later.
That was weird.
That?
No, I remember that.
It was disavowed by everybody involved with it.
That was weird.
It still existed.
Yeah.
You know,
it's still in the reprints.
Yeah. Is it?
Oh, I mean, in the trade, it's there. Yeah.
They're a weird couple, but that's what people like about them. You know.
Yeah, and the fact was, what I liked about them, and I think Dan Slott and Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon did it very well, was that Hank actually just wanted to stay in the lab and chill out and do experiments.
Yeah.
And Wasp is the hero.
Well, she's a fashion designer. She's really extroverted.
Right, exactly. And she was the one who was pushing him of like, we can't just make science, we have to put science to use for the world. And I loved that. I loved seeing like who was introduced originally as a sidekick actually be the person who's saying, let's go.
But the other thing that's so great about that is that Janet Van Dyne, you can see her, maybe she shouldn't have pushed him to do that, because look what he does.
Yeah.
And he snaps. He's someone who doesn't handle it well. And I also, for instance, I thought that they're not in the front of it, but the way Hank Pym is involved in Secret Invasion is brilliant. And you never see it coming. It's so well done, and what happens to Janet as a result, I mean, it's great.
Yes.
I mean, it's really good stuff. And so, but I mean, like, it's like, why have them come in as an afterthought? I mean, the way they're restructuring the cinematic universe works. So why remind everybody? Why just annoy everyone and have, you know, like Hank and Janet show up and be like, hey, we don't really do anything anymore. We get small and big, exciting, you know?
I mean, I would have been fine even if you just had them in the background of Avengers as just two agents that were off on some other mission.
Yeah. And
just establish, S.H.I.E.L.D. has some superpowered agents itself.
They have a lab.
Yeah.
Go stick Hank in it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it would have been very easy to, not that I'm, you know, knocking Joss Whedon for not doing it. What I'm saying is that it wouldn't be that difficult to do it even for Avengers 2.
But I think he doesn't want to dilute the Banner Stark broship.
Sure.
You know? I mean, then Hank's like, hey guys.
That would be kind of fun if Hank was the guy that they don't invite out to the party.
That would be great, because Hank like gets upset and creates Ultron. His angry thoughts.
Hank.
He has like the helmet on when he's thinking that, and it's born out. That would be great. Hopefully Joss Whedon will see this.
You didn't like me enough to invite me to the bar, so I'm creating a robot that can punch Thor. So there.
It's fantastic.